The observation deck smelled like burnt ozone and regret. Captain Yara Chen stood with her arms crossed, watching the combat simulation through reinforced glass that separated her from the trial chamber below. 16 recruits moved through the holographic environment, their movements clumsy and predictable. Standard military training exercises designed to weed out the weak before they got themselves killed in actual combat situations. She had seen this routine 1,000 times over her 12 years at the Coalition Defense Academy. Young humans desperate to prove themselves worthy of serving alongside the Krynn warriors, the Velthari navigators, and the dozens of other alien species that made up the Galactic Coalition military forces. Most of them failed within the first month. Subject 17 is ready for insertion, announced Lieutenant Davies from the control station behind her. Yara glanced at the digital manifest hovering in her peripheral vision. Subject 17, Kira Valdez, age 22, no prior military experience. Graduated top of her engineering class at Mars Technical Institute. Psych evaluation flagged for unconventional problem-solving and authority resistance. Why is an engineer in combat trials? Yara asked, not bothering to hide her irritation. Davies cleared his throat. She requested transfer. Said engineering wasn't challenging enough. Challenging enough. Yara repeated the words with the kind of sarcasm that could strip paint off bulkheads. Send her in. The chamber door hissed open below, and a young woman stepped into the simulation space. Kira Valdez was smaller than the other recruits, her dark hair pulled back in a practical braid, her standard-issue armor fitting loosely on her compact frame. She moved with the careful precision of someone who calculated every step before taking it. The other recruits barely noticed her arrival. They were too busy failing to coordinate their attack patterns against holographic enemy units that adapted to every predictable strategy they attempted. Begin individual assessment, Yara commanded. The simulation shifted. The other recruits faded into transparent ghosts, removed from Kira's scenario but still visible for comparative analysis. A new environment materialized around the young woman, a recreation of the Battle of Epsilon Station, one of humanity's worst defeats against the insectoid Xeric swarm 3 years ago. Kira's heart rate spiked on the biometric display. Good. Fear kept you alive if you knew how to channel it. The Xeric holograms emerged from the simulated corridors, their chitinous bodies moving with the disturbing fluidity that had caught Coalition forces off guard during the actual battle. Most recruits panicked at this point, either freezing or opening fire wildly, depleting their ammunition reserves within seconds. Kira did neither. She turned and ran in the opposite direction. Coward, muttered Sergeant Kraxis, the Krynn observer standing beside Yara, his forearms crossed in a gesture of dismissal. Another human who thinks courage means survival. Naya didn't respond. Something about Kira's movement patterns seemed deliberate, not panicked. The young woman wasn't just running, she was counting steps, glancing at the corridor intersections with the focused attention of someone building a mental map. The Xeric holograms pursued her, their synthetic screeches echoing through the chamber's audio system. Kira led them through a series of tight turns, each one bringing her closer to a maintenance junction that most recruits never even noticed during their trials. She's going for the environmental controls, Davies observed, leaning forward. Kira reached the junction and ripped open the access panel with efficiency that spoke of genuine engineering expertise. Her fingers flew across the interface, entering commands faster than the holographic system could track. The entire simulation flickered. What is she doing? Kraxis demanded. Atmosphere vents opened throughout the corridor system. The Xeric holograms, programmed to respond to environmental changes like their real-world counterparts, immediately scattered, seeking closed spaces to avoid the sudden pressure shifts. Kira emerged from behind the junction and systematically eliminated each isolated hologram with precise weapons fire, never wasting a single shot. Time, Yara said quietly. 4 minutes, 18 seconds, Davies reported. That's 3 minutes faster than the previous record. The simulation reset. Kira stood in the center of the chamber, breathing hard but controlled, waiting for her assessment results. Unorthodox, Kraxis said, his tone still dismissive. She did not engage the enemy directly. This shows weakness. Yara studied the young woman through the glass. Kira's expression was calm, almost bored, like someone who had just completed a routine maintenance task, rather than a combat scenario designed to break recruits mentally and physically. Run Scenario 7. Yara ordered. Davies hesitated. Captain, that's the advanced urban warfare simulation. We don't usually use that until week 6. Run it. The chamber transformed into a devastated cityscape, buildings reduced to skeletal frameworks, streets littered with debris and simulated civilian casualties. Enemy combatants, a mix of rogue human mercenaries and Velthari deserters, occupied strategic positions throughout the environment. The mission parameters appeared on Kira's heads-up display. Extract the hostage. Minimize civilian casualties. Neutralize enemy command structure. Most recruits approached this scenario with military tactics, trying to fight their way through enemy positions to reach the hostage location. It usually resulted in simulated civilian deaths and mission failure. Kira studied the scenario for exactly 15 seconds. Then she stripped off her armor. What in the seven hells? Kraxis sputtered. Kira wrapped her weapon in the discarded armor pieces and buried the bundle under rubble. She tore her uniform in strategic places, smeared dirt across her face, and adopted the hunched posture of a traumatized civilian survivor. She walked directly toward the nearest enemy position. The simulated mercenaries barely glanced at her, their programming designed to ignore non-threatening civilians unless provoked. Kira moved through their lines like a ghost, stumbling occasionally to maintain her cover, working her way toward the building where the hostage scenario was centered. "This is not combat protocol," Kraxis protested. "No," Yara agreed. "It's effective." Kira reached the hostage building and slipped inside through a damaged wall section. The enemy command unit was stationed 2 floors above, their position clearly marked on her tactical overlay. She located a structural support column already weakened by simulated battle damage. She pulled a standard-issue multi-tool from her boot and began working on the column's integrity, using engineering knowledge instead of firepower. Small adjustments, calculated stresses, the kind of sabotage that would look like natural structural failure. 10 minutes later, the entire floor above collapsed, eliminating the command unit and creating enough chaos for Kira to extract the hostage through the confusion. She retrieved her hidden weapon, reacquired her armor, and escorted the simulated civilian to safety while enemy forces scrambled to respond to what they believed was accidental building collapse. "Mission complete," Davies announced. 0 shots fired. 0 civilian casualties. Enemy command structure neutralized. Time, 19 minutes. Silence filled the observation deck. "She cheated," Kraxis finally said. "She adapted," Yara corrected. "She used available resources and enemy assumptions against them." "That's not cheating. That's intelligence." She activated the communication channel to the chamber below. "Subject 17 report to observation for debriefing." Kira's voice came through clear and steady. "Acknowledged, Captain." While they waited, Yara pulled up Kira's full file. The psych evaluation notes were extensive. "Authority resistance," the report said. "Refuses to accept standard solutions when alternative approaches are available. Challenges instructors on tactical doctrine, potentially disruptive to unit cohesion." Yara smiled grimly. She had received similar evaluations during her own academy days, back before the Krynn and Velthari had learned that human tactical flexibility was an asset, not a liability. Kira entered the observation deck 3 minutes later, still wearing her torn uniform and dirt-smeared face paint. She stood at attention, her expression neutral. "Wait, at ease," Yara said. "Explain your approach to Scenario 7. Direct engagement would have resulted in hostage casualties. Captain, the enemy had superior positioning and firepower. Standard tactical doctrine emphasizes using terrain advantages and enemy weaknesses. They expected armed resistance. I provided vulnerability instead, which allowed unrestricted movement through their defensive perimeter. You destroyed an entire floor of a civilian building." Kraxis interjected. "The building was already structurally compromised, Sergeant. I accelerated inevitable collapse in a controlled manner that achieved mission objectives with minimal additional damage." "Minimal," Kraxis repeated, his tone dripping with contempt. Kira turned to face him directly. "Sergeant, with respect, the simulation parameters prioritized hostage extraction and civilian safety. I achieved both objectives with 0 casualties. A frontal assault, even if successful, would have resulted in projected civilian deaths ranging from 8 to 15 based on standard collateral damage models for urban combat scenarios." "Projected deaths?" Kraxis took a step forward, using his considerable height advantage in an obvious intimidation display. "You speak of combat like it is mathematics." "Combat is mathematics, Sergeant. variables, probabilities, resource allocation, and outcome optimization. The only difference between engineering and warfare is that failed calculations in engineering don't usually result in people dying. That makes warfare more important, not less analytical. Yara watched the exchange with growing interest. Most recruits would have backed down when confronted by a Krynn warrior, especially one as decorated as Kraxis. Yara held her ground, not with bravado but with the quiet confidence of someone presenting verifiable data. "Your methods are unconventional," Yara said carefully. "Conventional methods are designed for conventional problems. Captain, the Galactic Coalition has been fighting conventional wars against unconventional enemies for decades. Our casualty rates reflect that mismatch. I studied the tactical reports from every major engagement since first contact. Human forces suffered disproportionate losses because we try to fight like Krynn warriors or Velthari strategists instead of fighting like humans." "And how do humans fight?" Yara asked. Kira met her gaze without flinching. "We cheat, we adapt, we use every advantage available, even the ones that look like disadvantages. We survived ice ages and predators and extinction events because we refused to play by nature's rules. Why would we start playing by anyone else's rules now?" The observation deck fell silent again. "Subject 17, Kraxis said formally. I am recommending your removal from combat training. Your methods are dishonorable and unsuitable for Coalition military service." But Kira's expression didn't change. "Understood, Sergeant." Yara made a decision that would change everything. Recommendation denied. "Subject 17 will continue advanced training under my direct supervision." Kraxis turned sharply. "Captain, this is highly irregular. So is winning against superior forces, Sergeant. I want to see what else she can do." Over the next 6 weeks, Yara put Kira through every scenario in the Academy database. Urban warfare, space combat, hostage rescue, defensive positions, offensive strikes, everything. Kira approached each situation with the same analytical precision, finding angles and solutions that conventional military training never considered. She failed scenarios too, situations where her unconventional approaches backfired or where raw combat skill was necessary and her engineering background couldn't compensate. But she learned from each failure, adapted, never made the same mistake twice. The other instructors watched with increasing unease. Lieutenant Davies reported that Kira was affecting recruit morale, encouraging other trainees to question standard doctrine. Sergeant Kraxis filed formal complaints weekly, citing breach of protocol and dangerous precedent. Yara ignored them all. She recognized something in Kira that the others couldn't see, the same quality that had made humanity valuable to the Coalition, despite being one of the youngest and weakest species in the galactic community. Humans didn't have the Kryn's natural warrior strength or the Velthari's innate strategic brilliance. They had desperation and creativity born from being evolutionary underdogs who survived through adaptation. The final combat trial was scheduled for week 8. The scenario was classified, known only to senior staff, designed to test not just combat capability but decision-making under impossible conditions. Kira entered the chamber at dawn cycle, her movements confident now, her initial nervousness replaced by professional focus. The observation deck was crowded with instructors and senior officers, all curious to see how the controversial recruit would handle the ultimate test. The simulation loaded slowly, building tension with each rendered element. Coalition command vessel. Bridge compromised. Life support failing. Enemy boarding parties on 3 decks. Civilian evacuees trapped in lower sections. Escape pods damaged. Communications offline. Mission parameters. Survive and save as many lives as possible. No winning condition. Just survival. Kira studied the scenario information flowing across her display. Her heart rate remained steady on the biometric monitors, her breathing controlled. She was calculating, processing, searching for an angle that others would miss. She found it in the enemy boarding patterns. They were moving in coordinated groups, following standard Jiric assault doctrine, which meant they were linked through pheromone communication networks. The ship's damaged life support could be weaponized. Kira moved through the simulated corridors with purpose, heading not toward the escape pods or the trapped civilians, but toward environmental engineering. She rerouted atmospheric processors, creating isolated pockets of modified air composition that would disrupt Jaric pheromone communication without killing them outright. Confused and unable to coordinate the simulated boarding parties scattered, Kira used the chaos to reach the trapped civilians, organizing them into efficient evacuation groups. She couldn't save everyone, the math didn't allow it, but she prioritized children and medically fragile individuals, making brutal but rational triage decisions. The simulation ran for 43 minutes. When it ended, Kira had saved 62% of the civilian population and eliminated the boarding threat without firing a single shot. The observation deck erupted in arguments. Some instructors praised her resourcefulness, others condemned her for not following extraction protocols. Yara silenced them with a raised hand. She activated the communication channel. Subject 17 approached the observation window. Kira crossed the chamber floor, her expression neutral despite the obvious exhaustion. She stopped directly below the observation deck, looking up at the assembled officers. "You've completed the final trial," Yara said. "Normally this is where I would inform you of your results and assignment. However, there's been a complication." Kira's expression finally shifted, showing a flicker of concern. "The Coalition Command Council has reviewed your training performance. They've concluded that your methods, while effective, represent too great a deviation from established military doctrine. You are being dismissed from the combat program, effective immediately." Silence descended over the chamber. Kira stood motionless, absorbing the news with the same analytical calm she brought to combat scenarios. "Understood, Captain," she said quietly. Yara felt something twist in her chest. She had expected protest, anger, or at least disappointment. This quiet acceptance was worse. "However," Yara continued, "before you're dismissed, I need you to do one more thing. Emergency diagnostic on the observation deck environmental systems. Several officers are reporting respiratory issues." Kira's eyes narrowed slightly. "Captain, I'm not currently qualified for engineering duties during dismissal processing. Consider it a final training exercise. The diagnostic panel is behind you." Kira turned slowly, located the environmental control panel built into the chamber wall and approached it. Her fingers moved across the interface, running standard system checks. Her movements stopped. "Captain," she said carefully, "these readings are wrong." "Explain." "The atmospheric composition in the observation deck is showing elevated carbon dioxide levels, but the auto-correction systems aren't responding. Also, the biometric displays for everyone up there show decreased heart rates and respiratory depression consistent with mild hypoxia." "Continue diagnosis," Yara ordered, her voice carrying a strange edge. Kira worked faster, pulling up system logs, cross-referencing maintenance records. Her expression changed from concentration to alarm. "Captain, someone has manually disabled the safety overrides. The observation deck is being deliberately suffocated. Oxygen levels are dropping at a rate that will render everyone unconscious in approximately 8 minutes. Can you fix it from there?" "No, ma'am. The manual overrides are physical, not digital. Someone would need to access the environmental control room directly, which is..." Kira pulled up a facility map. "2 decks above your position." Yara's voice came through the speakers, now noticeably strained. "Then I suggest you move quickly. Subject 17. Because everyone up here is about to find out if your unconventional methods can save lives when it actually matters." Kira's eyes widened with understanding. She looked up at the observation deck, seeing for the first time that the officers weren't moving, weren't arguing anymore. They were standing perfectly still, their expressions blank, their bodies swaying slightly. This wasn't a simulation. This was real. Kira sprinted toward the chamber exit, her mind already calculating routes and variables. 2 decks up. Environmental control room. Physical overrides. 8 minutes before everyone in the observation deck lost consciousness. Maybe 15 before brain damage started. The corridors outside the trial chamber were empty, the academy operating on minimal staff during early training hours. Kira found the nearest access ladder and started climbing, her engineering background giving her innate understanding of the facility's layout. 6 minutes. She reached the environmental control level and immediately encountered a problem. The access door was locked, requiring senior officer credentials she didn't possess. "Damn it," she muttered, examining the security panel. Standard biometric scanner keypad backup, and a physical override buried somewhere in the wall assembly. 5 minutes. Kira pulled her multi-tool and started dismantling the panel housing. Her hands were steady despite her racing heart. This was just another problem. Another scenario, Another equation that needed solving. The panel came free. Behind it, she found the mechanical override, a simple lever system designed for emergency access when digital systems failed. 4 minutes. The door hissed open. Kira rushed into the environmental control room and immediately understood why the safety systems had failed. Someone had physically removed critical components from the atmospheric processors, creating a cascading failure that the automated systems couldn't compensate for. This wasn't an accident. It was sabotage. 3 minutes. Kira's engineering training took over. She didn't have replacement components, but she didn't need perfect repairs. She needed functional repairs. She rerouted power conduits, bypassed damaged sections, and created jury-rigged connections that would make any proper engineer cringe, but would restore basic oxygen flow. 2 minutes. Her hands flew across the machinery, connecting wires, recalibrating sensors, forcing the system to accept her makeshift solutions. Sweat dripped into her eyes. Her fingers cramped from the precise work. 1 minute. The atmospheric processors coughed to life. Air began flowing again, carrying fresh oxygen toward the observation deck. Kira pulled up the monitoring systems and watched the environmental readings start to normalize. 30 seconds. The biometric displays for the officers showed their heart rates increasing, respiratory function returning to normal levels. They were going to survive. Kira leaned against the environmental control console, breathing hard, her entire body shaking from adrenaline. She had done it. She had solved the problem. She had saved them. Then she noticed something that made her blood run cold. The removed components hadn't just been taken out. They had been carefully placed on a maintenance table, arranged in precise order, as if someone planned to reinstall them later. This wasn't random sabotage. This was deliberate, controlled, and meant to be reversible. This was a test. Kira's communication device activated. Captain Yara's voice came through, clear and strong, no longer strained by oxygen deprivation. Subject 17. Report to the observation deck immediately. When Kira entered the observation deck 3 minutes later, she found every officer standing exactly where they had been before, their expressions alert and focused. No confusion, no panic, no surprise. They had known. "You complete bastards," Kira said quietly, her voice carrying more awe than anger. Yara allowed herself a small smile. The final trial wasn't in the chamber. Subject 17. It was out here. We needed to see if you could apply your unconventional thinking under real pressure, with real lives at stake, without the safety net of knowing it was just a simulation. We risked everyone's lives for a training exercise. "We risked nothing," Lieutenant Davies interjected, gesturing to a hidden panel that showed backup environmental systems on standby. "If you hadn't restored primary oxygen flow within the time frame, automated backups would have engaged, but we needed to see if you would apply the same creativity and determination to save actual people that you showed saving holographic ones." Sergeant Kraxis stepped forward, his forearms uncrossed for the first time since Kira had met him. "I have been testing human recruits for 6 years. Most possess adequate courage and sufficient skill, but courage without intelligence is just a faster way to die, and skill without adaptation is useless against enemies that evolve. You, Kira Valdez, possess something rare. You possess the ability to see combat not as a contest of strength, but as a problem requiring solution." "I don't understand," Kira said, still processing the revelation that everything had been theater. "You dismissed me. The Council rejected my methods." Yara walked to the observation window, looking down at the empty trial chamber. "The Coalition Command Council did review your training. They did conclude that your methods represent a deviation from established doctrine, but they didn't dismiss you, Kira. They promoted you." A holographic display materialized in the center of the observation deck. It showed a ship, sleek and deadly, unlike any vessel in the standard Coalition fleet. Human design aesthetic merged with alien technology, creating something that looked simultaneously familiar and revolutionary. "This is the Shadow Protocol," Yara explained. "A classified program authorized by the Coalition 3 months ago. Its mission is to develop tactical approaches that leverage humanity's unique advantages rather than trying to force humans into alien combat doctrines. We're building a unit that fights the way humans actually think, not the way others believe we should think." "You want me to join a secret military program?" Kira asked carefully. "We want you to lead tactical development for it," Yara corrected. "Your rank will be lieutenant. your authority will be considerable, and your methods will not just be accepted but encouraged. You'll have access to resources, personnel and technology that most officers never see. Your mission will be to find new ways to win battles that conventional tactics say we should lose. Kira looked around the observation deck, studying each officer's face. They were serious. This wasn't another test or manipulation. This was a genuine offer. What about the other recruits? She asked. The ones in standard training who think like I do but get punished for it. That's part of your job, Davies said. Identify them. Recruit them. Build a team of tactical innovators who can teach the coalition that humanity's supposed weaknesses are actually our greatest strengths. Sergeant Kraxis approached, extending one of his 4 hands in the human gesture of respect he had learned during his years working with human soldiers. I was wrong about you, Kira Valdez. I believed your methods showed weakness because they did not match Krynn warrior traditions, but I have learned that strength takes many forms. The Krynn conquer through force. The Velthari conquer through strategy. Humans conquer through adaptation. All are valid. All are necessary. Kira shook his hand, feeling the rough texture of his scaled skin, seeing the genuine respect in his compound eyes. I have one condition, she said, turning back to Yara. If I'm going to lead tactical development, I need full access to every military engagement humanity has been part of since first contact. Every battle report, every casualty list, every strategic failure. I need to understand not just what we did wrong, but why we keep making the same mistakes. Granted, Yara said immediately. Anything else? Yes. I want authority to question orders, if I believe there's a better approach. I won't undermine command, but I won't blindly follow doctrine that gets people killed when alternatives exist. Yara exchanged glances with the other officers. This was the dangerous request, the one that could create friction with traditional military hierarchy. Granted, she said finally, but understand that with that authority comes responsibility. If your alternative approaches fail, those deaths are on you. If your questioning of orders creates confusion that costs lives, that's on you. Innovation requires freedom, but freedom requires accountability. Understood, Captain. Not Captain, Yara corrected, her formal tone shifting to something warmer. We're the same rank now, Lieutenant Valdez. And actually, I'll be working under your tactical authority on most missions. The Shadow Protocol answers to you for combat methodology. I'm just the officer liaison who makes sure the rest of the coalition doesn't shut us down when we do something that makes conventional commanders nervous. The weight of that responsibility settled on Kira's shoulders. Hours ago, she had been a failed recruit facing dismissal. Now she was being handed authority over a classified military program and told to reinvent human tactical doctrine. When do I start? She asked. You already have, Yara said, gesturing to the holographic ship display. That vessel is currently under construction in the Luna shipyards. It'll be ready for trials in 3 months. Between now and then, you need to assemble your team, develop your tactical frameworks, and prepare to prove that the Shadow Protocol isn't just an expensive experiment, but the future of human military capability. Over the following weeks, Kira threw herself into the work with the same focused intensity she had brought to the combat trials. She reviewed decades of military engagements, identifying patterns in human casualties that conventional analysis had missed. Most human deaths occurred when forces tried to match alien species in their areas of natural advantage. Krynn in close combat, Velthari in coordinated fleet actions, Jarek in swarm tactics. The answer wasn't to get better at fighting like aliens. It was to force aliens to fight like humans in conditions of chaos and adaptation where human creativity and flexibility became decisive advantages. She began recruiting her team. Lieutenant Marcus Webb, a former Special Forces operator who had been reprimanded for using unconventional infiltration methods. Dr. Sarah Kimani, a xenobiologist who understood alien psychology better than most tactical officers. Ensign Tommy Park, a navigation specialist who could calculate jump vectors that standard computational models said were impossible. Each of them had been flagged by conventional military evaluation as problematic. Each of them possessed the kind of lateral thinking that the Shadow Protocol required. 3 months later, the newly commissioned ship hung in lunar orbit, its hull bearing the designation SP-01, no official name yet. Yara said they would earn that through their first real mission. The mission came sooner than expected. A coalition research station in the Kepler sector had gone silent. Initial reconnaissance suggested Zurich swarm activity, but no distress signals had been received. Standard protocol would have been to send a Krynn battle group to investigate and potentially engage. Instead, Command sent the Shadow Protocol. Kira stood on the bridge of Vors PA-01, surrounded by her hand-picked crew, watching the research station grow larger in the view screen. The facility was intact, no visible damage, but all communications remained dead. Thermal scans show life signs, Sarah reported from the science station. Human and Zurich mixed together in the central complex. No signs of combat. That doesn't make sense, Marcus said from Tactical. The Zurich don't take hostages. They consume or they kill. Kira studied the sensor data, her mind working through possibilities. Then she noticed something in the station's power distribution patterns. The central complex was drawing far more energy than residential and research areas required. They're not hostages, she said quietly. They're bait. The Zurich are using human life signs to draw coalition forces into a trap. The moment we dock, they'll detonate the entire station. How can you be certain? Yara asked from the command chair. I'm not, but the energy patterns match explosive device charging cycles, and the Zurich positioning puts them in sections with the best structural reinforcement. If I'm wrong, we waste time. If I'm mid and we dock anyway, we all die. Tommy spoke up from navigation. If we can't dock, how do we extract the humans? Kira allowed herself a dangerous smile. We don't extract them, we make the Zurich want to leave on their own. She outlined her plan. It was insane, violated multiple regulations, and required precise timing that left almost no margin for error. The crew listened with growing disbelief, but nobody argued. They had signed up for unconventional tactics. This was what that actually meant. SP-01 maneuvered close to the station but maintained safe distance. Then Kira activated the ship's experimental jump drive in a way its designers had never intended. Instead of creating a stable wormhole for travel, she generated an unstable spatial distortion field that made the entire region of space appear to be collapsing. The Zurich, highly sensitive to spatial anomalies, immediately interpreted this as an impending supernova or black hole formation. Their survival instincts overrode their tactical planning. They abandoned their explosive trap and evacuated the station, fleeing in their organic ships towards safer space. The moment the Zurich cleared the area, Kira shut down the distortion field and sent teams to extract the human researchers. 63 people rescued. 0 casualties. The operation took 17 minutes. Back at Coalition Command, senior officers reviewed the mission reports with expressions ranging from amazement to horror. Cotter had technically committed multiple violations of spatial navigation safety protocols. She had also achieved a perfect rescue against a superior enemy force. This is exactly the kind of reckless behavior I warned against, Admiral Thex, a senior Velthari officer, argued during the debriefing. Today you were fortunate. Tomorrow such methods will cost lives. Kira stood at attention, accepting the criticism, but Yara stepped forward. With respect, Admiral, conventional methods would have resulted in docking with that station and triggering the explosives. Estimated casualties, 147. Lieutenant Valdez's approach resulted in 0 casualties, and tactical intelligence on Zurich trap methodologies. I fail to see how following protocol to our deaths would have been preferable. The Admiral had no response to that. Over the next year, the Shadow Protocol conducted 15 more operations. Hostage rescues, reconnaissance missions, supply line disruptions, each one solved with approaches that made traditional commanders uncomfortable but consistently delivered results. Human casualties in Shadow Protocol operations remained at near 0. Meanwhile, conventional coalition forces continued suffering predictable losses in predictable engagements. Other species began requesting human tactical advisors. The Krynn wanted to understand how humans achieved victory through weakness. The Velthari wanted to study human unpredictability as a strategic weapon. Humanity was no longer the coalition's weakest member. They were becoming its most valuable innovator. Kira stood on the bridge of SP-801, now officially named Valdez's Gambit by crew vote, and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, new threats were emerging, new enemies with new advantages. But for the first time since humanity had joined the galactic community, she felt confident they could face those threats, not by becoming more like other species, but by becoming more authentically themselves. Her communication panel chimed. Yara's face appeared. New mission briefing in 1 hour. This one's complicated. Kira smiled. They're all complicated. That's why they send us. She turned to her crew, this collection of misfits and rule breakers who had proven that humanity's greatest strength wasn't matching alien capabilities but embracing human creativity. All right, people, you heard the woman. Let's go find out what impossible problem we're solving today. As Valdez's gambit maneuvered toward the jump coordinates, Kira reflected on the journey from failed recruit to tactical innovator. The instructors had told her she failed the combat trial. They had been right. In a way, she had failed to be the kind of soldier the Coalition thought it needed. Instead, she had become the kind of leader humanity actually required. And in the vast darkness of space, where conventional wisdom said humans had no place, Kira Valdez and her crew proved every single day that the best way to fight was to never fight fair, never fight predictably, and never ever fight like anyone expected. Because at the end of the day, that's what humans did best. They cheated, they adapted, and they won.